still in 1 Kings, and we're still in 1 Kings chapter 11, if you'll turn there with me. 1 Kings chapter 11. We're going to be in verses 11 through 26 today. Now, what we saw last time was kind of a summary of the last area of sin that Solomon was really involved in. We had seen in earlier chapters that he had problems because he had gathered a lot of money, and that seemed to be a pursuit of his, to gather a lot of money. And that was a problem. And now we see that he had multiplied wives, and these wives were foreign wives, and that was a problem because they led him away from God. And we've referred a couple of times to Deuteronomy chapter 17, if you want to turn there for a moment. Deuteronomy chapter 17, and about verses 16 and 17, I believe. Let's look at that. So, got to get my pages to separate properly. Verse 16, it's talking about when they would come into the land, and it's kind of a warning in Scripture about kings and what they may or may not do, and it's a warning to those kings that they shouldn't be doing certain things. So let's take a look at verse 16. It says, "But he shall not multiply horses to himself, nor cause people to return to Egypt, to the end that he should multiply horses. For as much as the Lord hath said unto you, you shall henceforth no more return that way. Neither shall you multiply wives, shall he multiply wives unto himself, that his heart be turned not away, neither greatly multiply to himself silver and gold." And so we have talked about the fact over the last couple of weeks that things. He had multiplied horses. He had these cities where he just gathered out. He imported chariots and horsemen or horses from Egypt, which is exactly what that passage in Deuteronomy had said not to do. And he had multiplied for himself money. He was very interested in money. He's going to get some opposition, or at least his son will get opposition, because of the fact that he had heavy taxes to fund all of his projects and this gathering of money that he had. And of course we've seen this multiplication of foreign wives, one of them being an Egyptian woman. But there were wives from all of those nations around him. And what did they cause him to do? They caused him to sin against God and start worshiping those gods that his wives had taken on. So he wasn't fully dedicated to God. And God had told him in the passages we looked at last week, look, this is what these additional wives have caused you to do. So today, penalty to Solomon of those additional wives, and further, we're going to think about the fact that sometimes there are penalties in this lifetime of habitual sin. Now, I don't want to go too far down that road because we have to remember that Jesus, in John chapter 9, when he's asked about the man that's born blind, the apostles, his disciples, assumed that it was because his father and mother had sinned that this person was born blind, and God had to tell them, or Jesus had to tell them, no, that's not the case here. It's not because of sins that this person was born blind. There's other reasons for that. So let's not get into the habit of judging people because they're having troubles in this life because of their sins. We don't want to judge people and say, oh, it's because they're sinners. That's all God's purview. But we do see here that sometimes when there is lifestyle sins, that God does bring about problems. We know He's gracious and merciful, but the other thing we also need to realize is that God is just. And we'll see that here in the passages today. So turn with me to 1 Kings chapter 11. And since my printer didn't print out everything I was going to preach today, we're going to have to probably read this